Welcome everyone, I'm Giulio Coraggio, a technology and data lawyer at the global law firm DLA Piper.
And I'm Antonio Ravenna, a journalist.
We're here to discuss a very interesting development when it comes to AI compliance.
And we're gonna make it during the time of a coffee break. So, Giulio, Italy's Council of Ministers approved 2 implementing decrees on artificial intelligence, but why does it matter beyond Italy?
First of all, it's worthy to say that Italy is the first country that has adopted a legislation that integrates the EU AI Act. The EU AI Act is a regulation, so it's directly applicable, but it leaves to each single EU member state some gray areas where local laws can be added. And Italy was the first one to do that, speeding up the process of creating a legal framework on artificial intelligence during a time where basically some of the provisions of the EU AI Act are already in place. So it's kind of puzzling the fact that the legislation became applicable before, for instance, the authorities in charge of supervising the compliance with the obligations were kind of identified.
What do the decree say about AI-driven decisions in the workplace?
This is one of the most tricky elements of the decree. We are seeing that AI systems are shifting from pure pilot projects to the usage in the operation companies. And in large organizations especially, we see that AI-driven decisions are coming more frequently than in the past. The risk is then that there is a dismissal of an individual just based on analytical decisions made by machine. And this is exactly what the Italian decrees try to address. They specifically ban this kind of dismissals, declaring that they are null and void. But this leads to the next question. What shall companies do to avoid this kind of challenge? It's always a question of accountability and being able to document the process that is in place. Because it is true that with the AI, the business of a company is more and more data-driven. And with AI, there is a risk of monitoring of individuals whose performance, whose behavior could be better tracked, even though, as we know, monitoring through electronic systems of employees' behavior is specifically prohibited under Italian law. So the problem arises when the AI reaches the conclusion that a person misbehaved or is underperformer. In that case, it's not enough to say that the process is adopted or is provided by an internal policy to review the assessment made based by the machine, but the whole assessment process from the outcome generated by the machine to the final decision should be carefully documented and used then in a potential dispute, or at least companies should have it ready to be used in a potential dispute. So in a way, this provision puts an additional burden on companies and an additional tool in the hands of employees to start a potential dispute in case of dismissals.
And Giulio, Italy also has introduced new criminal liability for AI failures. It's first. What does that mean concretely?
Well, it introduced not only a criminal liability regime, but also a civil liability regime. This move from Italy was the result of the decision by the European Union not to move forward with the directive on the liability arising from the usage of AI systems. Basically, what Italy did is what the European Union decided not to do. It introduced a sort of a presumption of liability in case of damages caused by AI systems. So basically, the company that is the provider, the deployer of a solution should prove that potential damages were not caused by the AI system. So the burden of proof is reversed on the company putting on the market using that technology. On top of that, for high-risk AI systems, there is a criminal liability not only of the individual that made the decision, but also of the company in case of lack of implementation of adequate security measures. So if there is a damage to an individual, there would be 2 layers of liability, or actually I would say 3, because There would be the potential sanction under the EU AI Act. There would be a civil liability in case of claims from the victim of the suffered the damages, and then there will be also a potential criminal liability if we are within the perimeter of applicability of this criminal liability regime against, again, both the company and the individual. The company would basically face an additional fine. In order to avoid that, it will have to put in place what is called a corporate criminal liability model. In Italian, we call it 231 model because of the law 231 that is the one introducing the corporate criminal liability regime that shifts away from the company the potential liability, obviously, if it's properly put in place.
And so, Giulio, what is the single most important thing that a company should do right now?
This is all happening during a period where, with the digital omnibus, some of the deadlines of the EU AI Act were postponed. These decrees will move forward and probably will be adopted before the coming into force of some relevant provisions of the EU AI Act. Companies need to put in place an internal AI governance model that is crucial in order to map what your employees are doing with the AI systems and make sure that the safeguards provided by the EU AI Act, but also by the other types of legislation applicable to the specific AI solution are in place in order to avoid any sort of liability. There is no way of avoiding any possible damage or risk, but the companies need to prove to have done what they were required to do in order to avoid sanctions, to avoid the civil liability, and to avoid now also a potential criminal liability.
So we can conclude that the AI Act is no longer a distant Europe legislation.
No, I mean, we should be operating, we as businesses, and that extends also to law firms, we should be operating as if all the obligations of the EU AI Act are already in place, because the time window available to businesses is very short, because it's not just a question of implementing a policy that needs to change the DNA of a company, the way a company is actually operating in relation to a technology that is evolving so quickly that no one basically can keep pace with that.
Thank you, Giulio.
Thank you, everyone. Arrivederci.